Welcome back to Mind Your Bap.
I'm Marty.
I'm Robbie.
And I'm Johnny.
Johnny McCambridge. Welcome to Mind Your Bap.
Thank you very much.
And absolutely delighted to have you with us, and thanks for volunteering to come on to Mind Your Bap and share your story. I directed you to some of Johnny's blogs, Marty.
Correct.
Absolutely fantastic stuff.
They were indeed, and we're going to touch on that, so I'll not say too much yet, but it definitely rings close home to me now, being about to become a follower myself. So some of the things you've read again, people will find very interesting. So again, thank you for coming on.
What we'll also do is we'll fire up links across the bottom, just direct people, Johnny, to your blogs for them to read, and they can maybe follow the journey with us.
Sure.
And I think it's fantastic that you've really stepped out to share your own stories, and we're going to learn more about you today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing what was behind those blogs and your life story. So once more, welcome. And so do you want to just start off and tell us a little bit about where you're from and your background?
Sure, yes. Well, as you said, my name is Jonny McCambridge. I'm originally from North Antrim, born in 1974 near Ballymena, and grew up Northern Ireland at the time. It was what it was, a dark period. Mm-hmm. I think to bring the thing relevant to what we're talking about today, which was mental health. I suppose it was probably when I was a teenager that I started having the feeling that something wasn't right within my head, and pretty much since then through till now I've suffered from at times quite extreme depression. And also anxiety as well. And as anybody who know, suffering from either depression or anxiety can be debilitating. Whenever you suffer from both, and sometimes simultaneously from both, it can make your life almost at times like you feel it's not worth living. Yeah. And that was I suppose where the way I looked at it for a long amount of years. And whenever I was particularly young, one of my keenest memories, I suppose, was always that when I was 15. I didn't think I would live to get to 20.
Really?
When I was 20, I didn't think I would make it to 25 or 30, and that was always the way I sort of measured my life. Was it was sort of in the moment, because I didn't think that I really had anything to look forward to. I suppose it's probably worth saying this, but one of the things about I'm always keen to do is, because of a logical brain, is try and look for an explanation as to what was a starting point, and was that like a self-diagnosis as opposed to reaching out? Yes, it very much was. I mean, what happened to me was when I was 16. I remember having a particularly bad summer, where I summer holiday where I spent virtually 2 months lying on the sofa, almost unable to move, and I was really, really low, and I had in my mind I had a location which was where I was going to commit suicide. It was a local spot, and this was where it was going to be.
At 16?
When I was 16, and it was I just remember those 2 months. That was all I could think about every single day. And
that was your summer?
That was my summer, and at the end of it, I was so desperate I decided to go and see the GP, which at that time, growing up in Northern Ireland, mental health didn't. It almost didn't exist.
It wasn't on the radar at all.
It wasn't on the radar. No. It wasn't spoken about. I often say that people talked a lot, but they didn't talk a lot about what was important.
Yes,
and especially men as well at that time.
Particularly men. And I came from a culture that it was ingrained within me that it was impossible. So looking back, the only thing I can think of is I must have been very, very desperate to actually go to a GP, because it was a small community. Everybody knew everybody's business. We all knew the doctor. The doctor knew everything about us. And I remember going in the waiting room that day and panicking, having a panic attack, and eventually going in and trying to explain to this doctor, this GP, that I was having a really bad time. And
can I ask you one more question, just to help anybody that's watching and listening to this, because I know there's a lot of young people watching and listening. What did a panic attack sort of manifest? Could you just
sure? Yes, I mean it's something I'm all too familiar with. It usually begins with a sort of a feeling inside your chest of panic, where you're not in control.
It feels like a borderline heart attack, doesn't it?
It almost does. Your heart starts to beat really fast. Mm-hmm. Then with me, it would usually manifest. I would get sweat all over my body, and then sometimes trembling hands. When it's really serious, it could be to the point where you almost can't control your arms.
Would your hands tingle, out of curiosity?
I would get tingle in the hands, yes.
And some experience that one, yeah.
Just a feeling of being out of control, your mind and body, because it's a physical and mental experience where you're moving so fast that you actually can't slow down, and you don't know how to slow down, and you think you're never going to slow down, and it's just utter desperation, and you can't talk to anybody, you can't communicate with anyone, and that was, that was how I was feeling. As I remember on that day and going in to see this doctor who, and I tried to explain to him, and I blamed myself because at the time, because it was like I couldn't find the words to tell him. I remember feeling like having like an out of body experience, like I was looking down at myself, telling this doctor what was happening to me, and he had very severe eyes, which I remember very clearly. And he basically, what he said to me, and I'll never forget it, was he said, "You're doing very, we know that you're a good student."
Yeah.
And he said, and we know, you're going to go to university, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, that's the plan. And he said, and then you're going to be a teacher, which it was never my ambition. He had essentially decided my career path for you. Yeah. And then he said, you have nothing to worry about in life. He said, and he said, I've a waiting list full of people
who are sick,
who are really sick.
Oh.
Yeah.
And for the ordeal that it was to go and do that, and then to be met in that way, was crushing. It was absolutely
exactly what I was thinking. Crushing was the word I was reaching for. Yeah.
I remember just running out of the surgery in tears, and I suppose the impact on that was it was more than 20 years before I would dare to tell another person what was going on in my head.
Wow. You basically grew the strength initially to go and say to that person, hoping to reach out and get someone back.
It was a shout for help, and it was is there help out there? Does something exist? Yeah. And you were and the door
was. The professional was telling you no.
It was slammed and very firmly in the face. That no, you and also you don't have the right, because you're a person with opportunities in life. So therefore, you don't have the right to come and ask for help. So, and you should not be feeling this way, because there are other people who are more and more in situations, where they of discomfort, where they should be feeling this way.
A hierarchy of illness.
And that made me so ashamed, and the self-loathing that came from that, and the sense of shame that I'd done it, and I'd spoken to him, and then I was afraid that other people were going to find he was going to tell my family. I'd never spoken to my family, and I just buried it deep inside myself, so deep inside that
for near 20 years, you said there.
For 20 years, probably. It was I was 16. I was well into my mid-30s before I dared to tell another single human being on this planet.
Can I be devil's advocate here, just and ask? It will only be your thoughts on this. Do you think if you'd had appropriate therapeutic treatment at that time, that perhaps the next 20 years wouldn't have turned out the way they did?
It's a great question, and it's something I've asked myself probably thousands of times myself. How I would think that was probably the one of the if you had to signpost key moments in your life, that was probably one. I think how things might have been different. It may not have been hugely different, because one of the things that when much later I actually was put onto mental health programs, I realised how difficult it is to find a tailored approach to suit yourself, and it took me a long time to find techniques that work for me. And as I say, at that time in that community, with the understanding, or to be more exact, the lack of understanding that there was of these things, it was probably a big ask that you were going to go in and find. And at that time it would have been probably unknown, or certainly very rare, for a GP in a country surgery to put a 16-year-old on antidepressants.
Yes.
Today, not so much, but at that time, people act on their habit and the culture of the time, and that GP was probably just doing what he knew, and in his own way he probably thought he was helping me by giving me a G up, and that,
yes.
he's not the only person that's tried that approach with me.
Generational thing as well, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course, and I'm keeping. I mean, it's still, I have, my own generation, my family, I can't talk to certain things about, yes. And I don't hold that against them. I just know that is the culture that they come from, and certain things are very, very difficult for them to talk to, and it's difficult for me. At first, it was difficult for me to even come out and talk about these things because you always have that voice in your head that tells me you're weak.
Yep.
And you're not ill, you're weak, and the hardest person to convince that you have a mental illness is yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's always that voice. To this very moment, I'm standing here telling you, you're bluffing. You're leading all these people up the garden path, trying to pretend there's something wrong with you. It's not. You're just weak.
Yep.
And that is probably one of the biggest challenges of all. And I don't hold it against the GP, the doctor at the time. He was doing his best. He didn't have the tools or the knowledge, as probably none of us had at that time, to understand what was going on, and I probably didn't help myself because I didn't have the means to make him understand what was going on, and that was an encounter.
And hopefully things have changed, although there may be still small pockets of practice which aren't up to scratch, but a big part of it is down to the stigma, and down to other pressures on professionals who are there.
One of the outfalls of that, of course, was that it made it I was very loath to later, whenever things became much more serious, and I ended up in hospital and all that. I was very, very loath to actually reach out because I don't want to be embarrassed and humiliated that way again. And whenever I did eventually concede that I needed help many years later, I was surprised and shocked by how much help was actually there and how many people were actually wanting to help, and nobody was saying, can't pull yourself together and catch yourself on.
Man up, that sort of
thing. That was all gone. There was counsellors, there were psychiatrists, there were nurses, and they all were there to help, and they were there to listen. And you had that sense of time had passed, and our understanding, and still things have to get a lot better. But it was things have definitely improved. The whole culture was a thing now. And growing up in North Antrim in 1970s and 1980s, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah,
yes.
It just wasn't a thing.
And there's another interesting aspect there that in rural areas it's probably even harder. And I think that still is a case today. That there are pockets of Northern Ireland and areas where there's hidden anxiety, depression and mental health issues, because we're potentially maybe more traditional or whatever, and the stigma, as we know, as we've talked about many times, Marty, is still heavily rooted in some areas of
it is. And one thing you'd seen that you'd said as well, a lot of people that sort of said, I would never have thought that about you, basically that they couldn't have pictured you being that type of person, really.
Absolutely. So that was the thing I heard years later, was because I went on to have a successful career and got married and had a good job, good home. Whenever I eventually did talk about it, the thing that everybody kept saying was, you're the last person that we thought this would ever happen to. And there was two things about that I think which are quite, and one is how it shows we never know what's going on in somebody else's head, and you always have to be accept what somebody's showing you to some extent, an appearance in a show. Excuse me. But the second one, and perhaps more importantly, was your own individual capacity to make other people think what you want them to think. And I was expert at that for so long, with to the point where even what the people who are closer to me, my own wife, my family, didn't know what was going on until things went too far and I ended up having a breakdown and was in hospital. And then it came as such a shock to people, and they said, how could this happen to you? You were always the guy that was in control. You were the last person. And I heard that so many times, and that was so instructive and so informative of how you just cannot make assumptions about it. And I've learned that because a lot of people, as I think about people having impressions of me, I have impressions of other people. And I did when I was growing up. And one of the things when I later came to talk about mental health was the number of people who contacted me, who I had known in earlier life. And I thought I knew them, and I thought I know this person has got it together. I wish I could be like them. And then all of a sudden they were sending me stories saying, we read what you wrote and it resonated with us, and I was in a similar situation and I couldn't believe it. And then I had to remember what people had said to me, and then it was the same way I thought about other people. And it just makes you think, what is the scale of this, and how many how many people have been affected, how many people still haven't spoken out about mental health when they need to, and that's the only thing is sharing. Everything comes through that. It has to be a discussion. And the more there is of that, the more the stigma is taken away, and the more comfortable it becomes for other people to talk about. And the sad thing is, I have people who have messaged me and said, I can't tell anybody, and I can't go and see a doctor, and I can't tell my family, but I'm telling you just because you understand. And I always say to them, I said, I don't understand. I have no extra. I said, you have to get help. And that's what that's what I always try and tell everybody who reaches out to me. I say, you need help.
Experience recently, actually, and it's sort of again, but trying to. Obviously not force somebody to go get the help, but it's just hard to sort of explain that yes, we do speak out loud about what's going on inside our heads, but you have to speak to the people closest to you as well. And that's because that's kind of seems to be, I've found, their barrier that they can't get through. But if they can get over that hurdle, that'll be the first proper step. Yes, they've reached out and tried to speak to like yourself and all, but if they can get over that next step, I think that's very important.
Absolutely. I like what you said there, Johnny. You're not an expert.
No,
you've lived experience, and it very much mirrors what we're trying to do here at your Bap, which is we're certainly not experts. We have some lived experience, but what we want to do is do the journey together, and in sharing and taking away the stigma, there's healing and hope. Fundamentally, and that can just maybe need the seed to start. And always seek the professional help.
One of the things I'm very conscious of is that I don't try and tell people how to. I know there's all sorts of people who present themselves as gurus and I think it's very difficult because it's so individual to yourself, and what works for one person doesn't work for another person. I remember getting an email from an old friend who had stuck with me, and she said, you've sorted this out, and she said, how can I sort myself out? She said, what can I do to make it better? And that was the words that stuck with me. I know it still is. What can I do to make it better? And the truth was, I had to say I don't know, but the first start has to be talking to people about it, sharing, to those people who are close to you, to medical people, beginning that process of understanding. That's how you make it better.
Very good, very good. Can we got to I just want to see what happened in that period then, from 16 to the next 20 years and stuff, because you have had a great journey. You pointed out you were successful in journalism, which would be and in those times I would imagine some of the stuff that was covered in Northern Ireland would have had an impact on you as well. Wouldn't necessarily have been therapeutic reporting that you would have had to have been involved in.
Absolutely. It was I ended up I went into journalism because I suppose I didn't have a focus in my life, and I became a journalist, and it gave me a focus. And I think I sometimes use a phrase. It was like a drowning man clinging to a piece of driftwood. It was something, and I actually, despite myself, I found I was actually quite good at it. I ended up working in daily newspapers. I worked on the security beat for a number of years. It was around the end of the Troubles, but there was still a lot of things going on, and there was a lot of trauma. You were reporting on that. That's part of the job, and it was difficult, but probably more for me was just the comfort in finding something that I actually belonged to, which was journalism, something I found I was good at, and I just threw myself. I have the obsessive personality type, so whenever I do something, I do it to absurd lengths. I can't do anything in a normal way, and journalism became that for me for years. It was just my crutch. I just worked every single day, every moment of every day, got higher and higher, and everybody thought, this guy's a great journalist, but inside I still felt completely empty, and I felt completely without confidence. And I remember hearing a phrase once from another journalist said this to me once. He said, every day is a day when I think I'm going to be caught out. I'm going to be found out, and that was the way I felt. I was I thought you're there's that voice in your head all the time telling you you're a bluffer. You're not really any good at this. You've got this job, and I ended up being news editor and eventually deputy editor at quite an early age. And but there was always this voice telling me in my head, "You're no good at this. You're rubbish.
You're a fraud.
You're going to get caught out.
You're going to get caught out." But what I was able to do, I suppose, was the really bad stuff. the stuff I talked about, from my teenage years, I was sort of able to drive that within myself, because I'd found something to which I belonged, and because I was able to focus so intently on it, I was able to manage. I still had voices in my head. I still had, suicidal thoughts, all that sort of stuff. But I almost sort of learned to accommodate it. I think one way I described once was, it's like whenever you have a pothole in the road, you can patch over it.
Yep.
But it doesn't fix the pothole. Eventually it will wash away, and you still have the hole in the road, and the crack will end up getting deeper than it was before. And that was probably such for, I was patching over things for a long time. And it was probably really only when I got into my mid-30s that my mental health situation came to the fore again, in quite a serious way. I was married by this point, and I'd just had a young child. My son James was born in 2013, and I think what was happening at the time, because I had quite a senior position in the newspaper, I was under a lot of pressure and dealing with a lot of responsibility, and because of my nature, I think almost in a masochistic way, I was challenging myself to do more. I decided at the same time that I was going to write a novel, which is a huge undertaking. I decided I was going to train to run a marathon, and my son was born, and like everything else, I wanted to be the perfect parent, and there was just all these things going on. And I think at some point in 2013, and because I wasn't sharing and I wasn't telling anybody, I could actually almost feel my sort of power to think logically starting to break down, which is a very scary thing. And I started to do quite, I started to display behaviour which was quite erratic. I started drinking very heavily. I was never much of a drinker, and I started drinking bottles of wine. I had never smoked, and almost overnight I developed a 40-a-day smoking habit.
Really?
Yeah, just really.
Wow.
I used to sit up all night, and I remember I would be in the back yard sometimes just crying for hours on end. And I used to go for these long walks. Walking was my thing, and I would just get up in the middle of the night and just walk for miles and miles, and sometimes often I wouldn't consider coming back, or not making it back. And the strange thing was that while this was all going on, I was still getting up every day and going to work, and functioning and going in there, and people would come in, walk past and say hello, the boss is here, and you just kept. And it's astonishing actually the capacity that the body and the mind has to keep going. At the time when with stress was, I don't know, I virtually stopped eating. My weight completely fell off me, and I was people told me I looked absolutely terrible. And I think it was then my son was about 4 or 5 months old, I think, when I had, I suppose, a major breakdown of sorts. I just had convinced myself I wanted to be on my own all the time, and I was telling my family basically to get out of the house. And I just remember being in the house. It was a Saturday evening, and my wife had gone to her parents because I couldn't be lived with at this point. And I just remember giving up. I just remember, just basically, I was in the kitchen and just thinking, that's too hard.
Everything came to your head.
It's too hard. And I just lay down. I think I just fell on the floor and just said that this is it. That there's no coming back. There's no going on. You have reached rock bottom. And then I started to have this shaking began. And it's difficult to express in a way, but I think this was almost, in a sense, it was my body saying, look, there's still something to fight for. It was almost like a physical expression of, look, you might have given up, but we're still here. And I started this ridiculous shaking. My arms and legs were going like this, and it was enough to make me think, right, okay. And I then tried to phone my wife, and I had my mobile phone in my hand, and my hands were shaking so that I couldn't actually dial the keys. And eventually I got hold of my wife, and she came and looked at me and said, you have to go to hospital. And I was taken, and I went in that night to the Ulster A&E, and I just remember my wife going to the reception saying, my husband is suicidal. Which I was. And it was like, oh my God, she has said this out loud to other people.
Yes. And
what's going to happen now? And nothing happened. They said that's okay, took me to a room, They got a counsellor to come and see me. He was lovely, and this was the first time I'd had a conversation from back when I was 16.
Yeah.
And he could see I was in a pretty rough state. They kept me for a few hours, put me on a mental health program emergency, and sent me home again. But I was probably at that point in a situation where I was almost too far gone to come back. And I think it was the next night, or possibly 2 nights later, I disappeared again. I remember turning off my phone and going for a long walk. And this time I was convinced that I wasn't coming back.
Yes.
And I stayed away for a few hours, and came very close to not making it back. And then I remember then it was late at night, and turning on my phone, and there was something like 60 messages and missed calls. And I had a message. The first one I saw, I thought, oh God, what have I done? And I had a message from my wife that's saying, "We love you, please come home."
Yeah.
And it reached something inside me that I'd probably given up on.
Yeah.
And I went home, and I then realised that both sides of the family were out looking, and everybody had been summoned, and I thought, oh gosh, I've really done it this time.
Yeah.
And my wife took me back to hospital that night, and I saw a doctor who said, "You need to go into hospital, and you need to go into hospital straight away." And I remember she was giving me this talk. It sounded like it was like legal talk, and then I realised she was basically telling me that I could be sectioned.
Yes.
if I didn't willingly agree to go in. And then they had to get a second opinion. Another doctor came to see me, and at this time I was still, because my mind was the way it was, I was still saying, "Look, doctor, it's now 3 o'clock in the morning. I need to be in work in 3 hours. So can we wrap this up, please?" And she was saying, "Look,
wow.
you need to take that out of your mind. You have to go to hospital." And so it was. I was admitted into Lagan Valley psychiatric ward, where I stayed for about a week. And my main memories of that were being on the first night and just being in absolute terror.
Yes.
And this, frankly dilapidated ward, and thinking, gosh, it could really do with a lick of paint. And I was lying in this bed, this hard bed with a flat pillow. And they took me in and said, just lie there. And every half hour or so, this guy came in and shone a torch into my face. And it took me some time to work out what, and then I realised he was doing it to see that I was still alive.
Yeah.
I had done it, and that was very, very humbling. Then, as I say, at first I thought, right, I'm not going to engage in this at all. This is, I've been humiliated by being put in here, and the first couple of days I wouldn't talk to them. And then I started to come around some of the other patients, and there were some, I met people in there who were very, very disturbed and very ill in some cases. And realising that the only way to get better was to actually engage and to take part in the treatments that they were trying to offer you, and to accept that you had a problem, and I know it was going to have to be confronted. And one of the things I remember clearly is that, and it was sort of the juxtaposition where the first night I went in, and this nurse admitted me, and she had a little chat to me. She was lovely, and she said, "What do you do, son?" And I was quite pompous and full of my own sense of self-importance, and I said, "Oh, I'm
really man thing, that, isn't it?"
Yeah, I said, I'm news editor at a daily newspaper. And I remember she looked at me and she just leaned across and tapped me on the knee and said, "That's nice, son. That's nice." And I suppose the message, I don't know if she believed me or she thought I was completely on. But the message was, once you're in there, it doesn't matter.
Absolutely,
we're all exactly this.
Absolutely.
We're all exactly the same, and we have to. We're treated the same way. And I learned a lot in a very short period of time. And it was a humbling experience, but a very, very valuable experience, and it's something that most people will never, hopefully, have to see, because you meet some people who are, as I say, are very, very ill.
And was that then the tipping point for your recovery, really?
No, unfortunately not. I was still stubborn, because I had this macho idea that I was going to come out and get better and I was going to be better than before. And the thing was, I'd had to come away from work, and I knew that people would start to wonder what was going on.
Ask that actually, what was that like going back in the work after the week?
The first day was horrendous, because I knew that you got these are journalists. This is their job to find out what's happening, and the boss has been away for 4 months or whatever it was, and walking back in, and my way of dealing with it was to basically say, right, I'm going to be harder than I was before. I'm going to be better than I was, which was, now looking back, was the wrong way.
Well,
I didn't accept my vulnerabilities. I said, I'm going to beat this thing. I'm going to take the medication. I'm going to do the classes, the therapy. I'm going to talk to all the people, and I'm going to come back. And in 6 months, I'm going to be running my newsroom again. And that was how it transpired for a while. I did come back, and I got my responsibilities given back to me very quickly, and quicker than I should have done. I kept saying, give me more, and I think it was about probably another year, probably would be into 2014, where I get sent to London for a conference, Society of Editors conference. It was like a high level, some of the most senior journalists of the UK were there, and it was in a fancy hotel in St Paul's, and there was an evening meal. And I remember I'd been feeling not great, although I wasn't yet admitting to myself that things were starting to go wrong again. And I remember being at this banquet and having the most almighty panic attack coming on me in the middle of a room with, 400 other journalists, peers, people who were senior and me.
Macho as well.
And I couldn't hold my knife and fork in my hands, and I had a napkin, and I was being shredded because I was having to run out of the room, just run and panic and go into the toilet, and locking myself in this cubicle for about 2 hours and lying on the toilet floor.
Wow.
Just with waves of anxiety, just taking and realizing, you think you got yourself better, you told yourself you'd done all the things they said to do, but here you are again. And it's actually worse than before, because whenever you do it first time and you get the help, that's one thing, but whenever then you get the help and you fall again, the fall is that much harder, because I realised I'm not better, and but then it was basically back into the same cycle again, started to get erratic behaviour, and I think it was probably around, I kept going as best I could, but my son was getting older, and it was probably around 2016 that I decided I needed to make a major change in my life, and that change was that I decided to leave work and the career that I'd spent basically a quarter of a century building up. And the day it came to me very clearly, it was my son's first day at nursery school. And my little boy at that time, he was very shy and sensitive. We knew, his mother and myself knew this was going to be a difficult day for him, and I hadn't organised myself well enough to get the day off. And I was in the office and I was editing the paper that day, and it was just a bad day. And I'm all the whole time I remember thinking, my little boy is going to nursery today, and he's going to be crying and he's going to be hanging on, and I should be there. Why am I here? Whenever I should be there? That is where I need to be. And it just was, I call it an epiphany as such. It was probably more gradual than that, but it was that moment, and I remember then it was shortly after that I went back to my doctor, said, look, we're here again. She said, okay, we have to take some more time off work. But that time, whenever I left, I accepted that there was going to have to be changes in my life, and I wasn't going to. I felt that it wasn't healthy for me to go back to work, because I wasn't balancing the roles of being a parent with being a professional, so I walked away from it.
Well, I have so much admiration for that, because whilst I have no experience of having to make that decision, the experience that I have had is changing career and trying to balance the burden that we have of being a parent and a dad, and that masculinity and all that. And that what you did there was absolutely, honestly fantastic, because it's for what you certainly, you look at your son, and that's part of the decision making process and the catalyst and the leverage. But I mean, it was the only way that you were going to be better and be a dad and be present in the home and have the impact that you're having. I
felt like it was, and I hadn't everything worked out in my head. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know I was going to be a blogger. I didn't know I was going to write books. Any of these things, I just knew that I can't keep going on like this, because you've done it. This has happened to you twice now. You've got a family who have been very, very patient, and you at the end, you have to do something. Some change has to come from you, and what worked before, or what you did before, hasn't worked. So it's time for something more radical, and that was the decision I made, and it was terrifying.
Yeah,
it was absolutely terrifying.
My hat comes off to you. It really does.
Does indeed. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
As I said, I'm about to become a follower myself. Literally any day now. See,
good luck.
Thank you. So I've been told about many people. But just a quick question. Leading up sort of to becoming a follower, what were you like them sort of 9 months, that period?
Wow. I probably wasn't my best. It's what there are, and that's probably one of the things I regret, is at that time, whenever it should be the most exciting time of your life, my health probably wasn't allowing me to project the happiness that I should have had, and I wasn't probably giving enough of myself to my family and my wife, and I tried to, I hope I did support her well enough, but I mean, at the time I was well into that cycle of where things were becoming very, very serious, and it was, I remember the birth itself was obviously it was traumatic, because it was a long labour, and a very, very difficult birth, and times the health of the child was seemed to be in peril, but we got through that, and then there was just the joy of having this child, and then the crying started.
I
wasn't ready for it, Marty.
You look at me there, it's coming.
You can't. You're never ready. You can't be ready when it's your first child. You just have to take it on the chin and make it up as you go along.
It's difficult. It's a life changer. I didn't react well to the crying. I desperately wanted children, and I've been blessed with 2. They're big now, 20 and 18.
Yep.
But I remember, and I was disappointed with myself, my reaction to a child crying in the middle of the night, and I always wanted to have children.
So I've started thinking about that, because I love my sleep, and it's kind of going, I think I'll be alright, but again, you can't prepare yourself.
Nobody told me. I thought, actually, your own child cries, you'll wake up and you'll love it, and you'll go,
had that thought last night.
It's not the first thing that comes to your head.
Being a parent is the greatest privilege and joy you'll ever have, but there are times when it is hard, and there are times when you don't enjoy it, and I've written that, and people have come to me and said, oh, you shouldn't say that, and I say, but it's true. There are times, and there are days when I've been put into a bad place by things that happen happen as a parent, and one of my challenges at the minute is because of my personality and the nature of it. I try to be a perfect parent, and none of us can be a perfect parent. All you can do is try your best. But there are times where you think, God, this is hard, and some people it didn't come naturally to me. That's one of for me to give up my career to become a daddy. I wasn't wired to do that. I was probably wired to be a journalist, and all of a sudden giving that up and saying, right, okay, now this is your new life. It's a hell of a thing to come to terms with.
Well, we've run out of time today for this podcast, but I think that leads us nicely in to just discuss what we're going to be talking about in our next episode, Johnny, which is your blog. Okay. So what's it called?
The blog is What's a Daddy For?
Okay. Brilliant, guys. I came across it on Twitter. I've read quite a few of them, and I enjoy them. I enjoy your writing style, particularly the latest one that I read about a place called Corbett.
Corbett, yes, was a new one for me. Getting lost in Corbett. Guys. Genuinely, even if you don't, before the next episode, if you want to look up the blog, particularly that one, I really enjoyed that from perspective of a man, and I could see it was funny, but the deeper context of it, you really don't have to script too hard to have empathy with some of those feelings, Marty. With you imminently ready to hit parenthood, I would suggest that you start getting into some of Johnny's stuff. There's some brilliant pearls in there. I'm gonna have a look. So the next time we come back, that's what we're going to discuss. Is there anything you want to? Is there any wee gems or anything you can think of that might set the scene for what we're going to be talking about next time? Well, regarding the blog, I mean, I'll probably finish by telling you how the concept and the name of the blog came out, because after I'd given up work and I had all this time at home, my son, I remember we were on the sofa one day, I think we were watching He-Man or something on the TV, and he said to me, Daddy, I know what Mummy does, but I don't know what you do.
Wow.
What's the daddy for? and that was
brilliant.
That was how that's the start of it. That was the name.
Brilliant.
And it all flowed from there.
Okay, guys. So so tune in next time for more Mind Your Bap and Johnny McCambridge and What's a Daddy For. So I can't reach across, but remember, guys,
we'll
Mind
do it
Your
here.
Bap.
Yes.
That's a wrap.
Thank you, guys.